I'm going to take you all the way back to the day I left school.
Did you always know you're going to be an engineer?
Arrived back home and told my dad that I'd got a job working for an engineering contractor. And he said, but you're supposed to be going back to school in 6 weeks' time to do your A-levels. What we do as a world impacts the minute of everybody's life, almost without them knowing it. What we do is often invisible. But it took me maybe 25 years, but then to lead that organisation has been some of the proudest elements of my life.
What changes have you seen? What trends are you seeing in the industry?
The people that worked for the business and input in the business every day, you had a responsibility to make sure their wages, but they were relying on us to make sure that business didn't function well every day. We're delighted now as a group of these 4 individuals to hand that legacy on to a new generation of engineers.
Dave, thank you so much for joining us today at Business of Building. I mean, what a pleasure. I've known you since 2018 now, beginning of, and our first meeting was we just kept talking, didn't we? We had so many, in Brian Cox's way, universes and galaxies colliding in our little engineering world, and it was a pleasure, and it's still a pleasure, and it's amazing to be interviewing you for to share this with everyone else as well, what stories we discuss. But without further ado, if we dive straight in, you were an MD, you are a chairman of FHP ESS, which is based in 7 places all over UK. You're an engineer. I'm sure I'm missing some steps here, but do you wanna give brief personal journey or detailed personal journey into the world of engineering? I mean, one of the questions which also comes to my head whilst you're doing that, perhaps if you don't mind touching on, is how FHP has evolved during this time of your career there and beyond, kind of thing as well. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to take you all the way back to the day I left school, which when I was 16 years old, just after finishing O levels.
Did you always know you're going to be an engineer?
Well, that's exactly the point. So I passed my O levels, much to the excitement of my teachers, who thought I could absolutely do nothing. But so I passed my O levels, and my parents, I think much like yours, Gary, probably had expectations of A levels and not so much university at that stage. That wasn't really part of my life, but certainly A levels and going back to school. And instead, sort of 4 days after I got my O level results, I was out looking for a job, and then arrived back home and told my dad that I'd got a job working for an engineering contractor in Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England. And he said, but you're supposed to be going back to school in 6 weeks' time to do your A levels. I said, Dad, I just want to work. And coming from the northeast of England, where engineering was always, it's in the DNA.
I was about to say, it's pretty
Of
much
that part of the country, and my dad was very much part of that sort of culture, and he accepted that straight away. My mum took a little bit more persuasion. It was the working life for me, but from that stage started, and almost by accident, could have been any type of engineering, but ended up in a contracting business, which was actually based out of Sheffield but had an office in Newcastle, and it was an M&E contracting business. We installed pipework systems, we installed electrical systems, we installed doing the hospital rebuilds and things that were going on in that sort of early 80s time.
M&E touches so many different sectors, doesn't it? Like the breadth of it.
Suddenly, and it opened up to many people that might, a university education is fantastic, and I did that at a later date, realizing that I'd probably made a mistake and missed out on something. But it opened up to areas of life, as you touched on, that M&E is part of everybody's world. From the moment almost they perhaps are born in hospital, and all of their working life and their living life is spent in that built environment. And I perhaps didn't appreciate at that time just what an important part of my life and everybody's life, mechanical, electrical, building services and real estate is to everybody. So it didn't take long for me to, some people get caught up in medicine and they get caught up in the law and they get excited about that. Suddenly it was exciting to me, part of a world that touched every part of everybody else's world. So I went through that process of working with that M&E contracting firm, and in that process went back to college and did my sort of technical learning, if you like, at that point in time over the next sort of 4 or 5
Were
years.
you an apprentice as well? Was
Well,
it an
yes,
apprenticeship?
and it's
Because
something
right now
that,
it's being talked of by the government so much, isn't it? So,
and rightly so, and I think as we go through and talk about how the industry has perhaps changed over time, the guys and girls that work within our industry now perhaps will never have joined two cables together. They may never have screwed a 4 inch length of pipe in a steam main that's going to work around a factory. And we are, at the end of the day, a very technical, a very often ethereal business, but it's very much a practical nuts and bolts, pipes and wires, wrenches and screwdrivers, end result of what it is that we design, what it is that we manage, and what it is that produces those building services for everybody that they use every day. It's a very practical thing that we do. And I don't think we should ever forget how, at the end of the day, all the work that we do on a small screen in a very powerful computer in a nice office in our 7 locations across the UK, impacts on people's day-to-day comfortable life. And so I get excited about it in a way
can
that
see that.
other people would feel a little strange, but it means something to me that what we do as a world impacts everybody, the minute of everybody's life, almost without them knowing it. They understand the law and they understand medicine. What we do is often invisible. And in fact, you've seen in your working life in the really high-end retail where you want to make it invisible.
Yeah.
People don't understand why they're comfortable. People don't understand why they're happy sitting in a particular spot in an office or at home or in a public building or in a theatre somewhere. But there's a reality for that, and it's what we do every day that makes it that way.
It's fantastic, isn't it? So
Yeah.
so then you went back to studying.
Mm, yeah, I realised that I knew absolutely nothing. That was the point. Realized that I knew absolutely nothing and had to learn something else. So I went back and did my sort of really technical qualifications. Then eventually I did a degree, an engineering degree and a science degree through the Open University, which I
Wow.
really enjoyed as an experience because it allowed me to continue my work and continue my career while having a little bit of pressure in the background of doing that kind of stuff. It takes longer, but I felt I fulfilled what I needed in my head to make.
It's a different kind of pressure though, Dave, no?
Yeah.
Because like the pressure is different to having the pressure of joining uni right after you come
Yes.
out of school, deciding what you're gonna do, whereas you went into the workplace, found out what you wanted to do, and then kind of studied
That's really
alongside getting
true.
it. Yeah, yeah.
And
Which
I
gives that
I had
confidence as well, isn't it? That you feel like, okay,
yeah,
this is the right path.
but I admire really an awful lot the way that our graduate program at FHP is a real success now. Taking kids who've learned the basics of what it is that they've needed to do at university, and whether that be mechanical or electrical or the more rounded environment that we like our engineers to be in FHP. We like them to have that understanding of every discipline within the industry: energy, sustainability, mechanical, electrical, lift technology, anything like that. We like that rounded individual, but we can teach them everything that they haven't learned at university. And that is so much. We know that, we accept that. But they've made a choice to come into our industry at a relatively early age because they've done a specific degree or a specific technical qualification in what we need. And they've committed their life to it in the same way that I did early on, just through a different path. And without that, without that education now, I think it's very difficult for them to achieve what we need in a really complicated and intensive industry now. It's not easy for them, and I admire them intensely to have made that choice to commit to an industry that perhaps isn't as glamorous as some of their colleagues and some of their their alumni at university have been doing, but it's essential to what this world needs.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, we'll come back to that on how essential it is when we talk
Yeah,
about, the sustainability, the ESG
yeah,
element of it.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
I mean, just to circle back to your journey, then you
Yeah,
left
so
uni and Open University.
yeah,
Did you join FHP at that time or?
so I joined FHP. So I initially worked for the health service as an engineer, and I worked for the MOD as an engineer, and that was when, and maybe something else we can circle back on over time, and just how industry has changed in that time. It was a very, in the UK in that 80s, was a very it was a non-privatized sector. A lot of government owned intensive industries. The private sector as we know it now almost didn't exist, but it was making that change from one to the other. And I realized quite quickly that I didn't want to go through that change process with the NHS or with government and public sector organizations. I saw the change coming where the private sector was going to lead our industry. And that was when I joined FHP in Milton Keynes in the late 80s. And from then, FHP has been literally a fundamental part of my life. It's been my working environment. It's been where I met my wife. It's been where we've brought up the kids. It's been a fundamental. It's been a pillar of my life all the way through, even through its ups and downs. And so it it meant everything to me to start literally, and my colleague Graham will often say this, that the first title Graham and I had in the business didn't even use the word engineer. We were a technical surveyor. We were a technical assistant. Literally, the if you look back on it, the lowest rank in the whole of the organization. And then, it took me maybe 25 years, but then to lead that organization has been some of the proudest elements of my life.
Almost a decade and over, isn't it?
Yeah, for
Well,
sure. Yeah, for
how has
sure.
FHP changed during that time, since you
Oh,
joined? And because
yes.
there is an element of the structure, but also inherently of what the organization does, because um, it's not so obvious for the people out looking in from the outside as to what the different strands of engineering are and why they are so different. So, do you want to?
Yeah, no, it's interesting that the birth of much of our industry, and you go back to it.
Genesis.
Yeah, yes, and with the technical revolution of the very basics of first air conditioning and the basics of first heating, we can go back hundreds of years for that. But inevitably, it's born out of providing the built environment with a temperature that the human being can find comfortable to function in. But FHP took that to the next level, and we were one of the first businesses to do that. Where yes, we would design engineering services, but and I credit the H in FHP and Mr. Higgins, who recognised that the world didn't stop after we'd walked away from a building, and commissioned we built an environment that people could function in, whatever that was, whether it was an office or whether it was a
That
theatre.
was the design element. So you
Yeah.
designed
And we
the.
realized very quickly that beyond that, after that date of commissioning, after that date where people were comfortable in that building, it needed managing. The engineering services needed to be maintained. They needed to be managed. They would need to change. They would need to be flexible. And in fact, the costs associated with running that property for the next 25, 30, 50 years, whatever it might be, will more than, of course, more than outweigh the initial cost of and the reasons for building that building in the first place. And the thing that FHP brought to that more so was the flexibility that I hope and I really pray that we continue to do, is to advise our clients and advise our occupants of those buildings that we've managed some of them for the last 30 or 40 years, that the function of that property will change. the function of the way people want to use that building will change. And we can have a huge influence and a huge beneficial influence on how that building function changes in our element of the engineering services. And we can do it cost effectively. We can advise our clients in a way that says, well, if you do this, Mr. Client, if you do this, Madam Client, in 10 years' time, you're building in some resilience to your building. We know that in time, you will change the way you function within this building. What we want to give you, what FHP wants to give you, is something that is still practical, still tangible, but is cost effective in the way that you function within that building over the next 20, 30, 40 years, be it through a maintenance contractor that we can manage on your behalf, be it through building or adding building management systems and changing building management systems in the way that we manage those engineering services for you. And even to the point of where, we might be looking at building occupancy, the real basics of just providing people with 21 degrees C and 50% RH in a comfortable, non-drafty environment that people desire now. And we know that if they're a pharmaceutical business, they might want to change that space from person occupied to function occupied. They might want to be carrying out some processes in those areas. And we want in FHP to give them the flexibility of those services where best we can. And we love to engage with our client. So our client, the more they tell us, the more we can help them. Tell us about your vision for that building. Tell us about your future plans for that building. Tell us when the leases are finishing. Tell us when your tenants are entering and re-entering. We can make such a difference. We can add such value to the property just by being open with us, and we can amend the services to suit you.
Yeah, because it all adds up, isn't it? It's the long-term vision of the, as you said, the use of the property. I guess FHP touches from the design element, there is the easier part, and then you touch into different property services and life cycle, as it were, of a property as well. So from
Absolutely.
the
And I
starting,
mentioned,
and
and
that
I
was Mr. Higgins, was it?
It
Who
was, and
kind of started.
Mr. Higgins did that, and he sat me down in his office and told me his ethos for the business, and it's something that we've taken forward over now, even the 30 years since we took the 20 years since we took the business from him, and the time since he's passed on from this world. But FHP have buildings across London, across the UK, and indeed across Europe that we've been involved with for some 30 or 40 years. And we want, we've seen buildings that we have designed and installed the engineering services for. We've seen those buildings maintained, we've seen them changed, we've seen them move from one function to another. And then we've been involved in the dilapidations as tenants have moved out. We've seen those buildings literally pulled down and started again. And we've helped with that acquisition and disposal process of that estate. We've then looked at, we've engaged with the clients and decided what they want to do with that literally flat ground. And so that phrase of cradle to grave for us is absolutely in our DNA. We can help at any stage of that property life cycle. And clients have come to respect us for that. We're known for it now. And so at points in time, whether you're buying or whether you're selling or whether you're changing the tenant or you're changing the function of the building, FHP help with that. And we understand that built environment and we understand the economics that go around that, where sometimes clients have deep pockets and they want to spend some, they want to invest in literally for the next 100 years, particularly if it's a pension fund who are looking to retain that property over a significant period of time. But many others are looking for flexibility of using property, and we've helped them to achieve that.
It's so incredible. And I just like you talked about, I mean, we met in a property, I won't name it, I don't know, in King's Cross, but
That's
I
right.
still remember Stuart Rose mentioning that, we have helped this property change hands so many times, and we know absolutely every single pipe work, duct work, every cable that runs in this building, and not even the
Absolutely.
owners know it. And that was just
Absolutely right.
amazing.
You know, we will, somebody will say to us, we know that the seventh floor used to be occupied by such and such. And then it's split this, oh yeah, the seventh floor split into three. So I know that riser B contains the extension to the HV, to the bus bar system, that we moved the direction of that and we took it across the level, and with the detail that we know in those properties, is it's almost boring. We we could bore people to death about the depth of information we have about a particular building. Yes.
That's the quality of any engineer, really, isn't it?
Isn't it just?
You can,
Isn't
you
it
can
just?
keep going. I
Sit us
mean,
down for more than half an hour. Yeah.
uh, uh, so so Mr. Higgins started the technical management arm,
Yeah.
perhaps, is
Yeah.
that? So we have
We,
now, you've got technical management, you've got design, and then there is the energy and sustainability. So perhaps energy is the more recent addition. Is that fair
it
to
is
say?
the most recent, Gary, and you're right to say that. But I think we've been cognizant of it all the way
Yes.
through our work. It is the fuel with which we derive our end product from. And I think with an FHP, there's always been and I hope it has been a sustainable strand to our business, that we've never been a wasteful business. We've
Which
always
is
make the best of the resources that are available to us. And that includes, well, hang on, if we can do that without using so much energy, then why aren't we doing that? And buildings have become so much more intensive now. They are more complicated. They are more intrinsically um, intensive as a service that we provide. But FHP has tried to be and tried to maintain a level of practical engineering that makes change possible. We've all seen this, and I liken ourselves to a heavy engineering type background, where we try to engineer into our design, we try to engineer into the management of our properties that we get involved with, a level of quality that suits the client's pocket. But if we've built in that level of quality that our engineers can almost instinctively provide to a property, it helps flexibility in the future, that we're not just a throwaway business. We are absolutely not a throwaway business. And our client and our guys and girls who do dilapidations, who involve themselves in expert witness, they understand that the SIBSI guide of saying that a chiller only lasts 20 years, we've managed to persuade them to put that to one side in their working life. And not everybody wants to throw away a chiller just because we understand that by it's 20 years old in 6 months' time, it will have to go. We'll make it work again, and we'll make it work for another 10 years if we need to. And the
with
carbon,
the proper maintenance and then a guidance for the client, really, isn't it?
absolutely,
Yeah.
and make it function that suits what we do. And we've probably contributed, and we take no credit for this because it's something, as I say, that we do instinctively, but we've probably saved ourselves millions of tons of carbon just by persuading our clients to reuse what they already have, to re-engineer what they already have, and to make it function for the purpose that they need in the future. And we're very conscious that we're not a throwaway business.
It's so interesting because I'll be interviewing Juliet Morgan later, who is a ESG director at Gensler, and she mentions you can, you if with a good design, you can get rid of so much carbon footprint just by
Absolutely.
thinking up front and making a good design happen where you're not, you're working retrofitting, you're restoring, you're reusing, and it's
Yeah.
not just, to tick a box in an EPC certificate. I'm making a light of it
No,
perhaps,
yeah.
but just to tick a box in a certificate, you are just like, okay, let's. I'm not suggesting either that people do it, but maybe people don't know it and they think that by doing this we are going to be energy efficient for the future,
Yeah,
and then it all depends on a consultant to help them and guide them, really, isn't it?
absolutely. And that you're absolutely correct. And what FHP has never been is a tick boxing business. We try and advise our client on what their best needs are. And if that and if everybody, not everybody, but people like shiny and new. And often shiny and new isn't the best. And it's certainly not the best for the environment. And if anything, we instill that in our guys and girls in the business that, you know, it's not a throwaway society to us. We cannot function like that anymore. Let's let's reinvent what we already have in a property. Let's make it work again for the client that wants to keep that. And we can re-engineer engineering services to make it last twice its expected life expectancy. And that is a huge impact on the environment. But it takes a different methodology, it takes a different mindset within our guys and girls to make that happen. And that's something that I hope FHP will do for the next 50 years as it has done in the previous 50 years.
It's so incredible, really, isn't it? And then we have got new family members as well join in, as
Yeah.
it were, which was last 5 years have been quite interesting as well as a part of the journey.
Yeah, and it's that it's been a challenge to everybody the last 2 or 3 years. What I really enjoy about and really find remarkable in FHP is we've made those changes that to the working patterns, and we've become, I think, more cognizant of people's life outside of work. And I really appreciate that I can go back to times when you know it was literally a 10-hour working day, and you came to the office to do that, and you left you came in when it was dark, and you came and you left when it was dark in the evening. And the world has changed from that, and I'm really encouraged by the way we've embraced those changes to the working life now. And I think our colleagues have done the same. You call them our family members, and I really like the way you use that phrase. And people have that's not without its challenges in how we lead those and how our management teams lead people and how we interact with each other. That's a challenge for everybody now. Nobody anticipated us working remotely in the way that we do now, and the way that we function as a business. But I'm really encouraged by particularly the way FHP has embraced that. And I have seen how I think people have been really concerned that the business becomes disparate, that people don't see each other, they don't interact. And yet I've seen that in other ways where, people haven't been together for a couple of weeks where they would have been, 10 years ago, they would have been sitting next to each other. The relationships that those people have in the business are still strong, and they're still warm, and absence almost makes the heart grow fonder. And I see people coming together who are working as a team, but when they physically come together, that the warmth and the affection that they have for each other, that they've achieved their objectives at work, they've fulfilled what the business needs, but they feel fulfilled themselves in the way that they've done that. And then we come together as teams in the that our business loves to get people together on a personal level. And that warmth that people have for each other doesn't change, does it? Though
No.
that interaction of people's personalities is still there, but not without its challenges for the senior management, where I think they have to understand, particularly people of perhaps my era and my age, it's overcoming those trust issues, that people are functioning and they're working and we're producing for the client. And over time, that has not been an easy adjustment, I think, for a lot of people to make. But now we're appreciating that we can be more productive, be more energetic in the way that we produce work for our clients.
It's quite interesting because you and I were together a day before yesterday, and we were talking about, but when we started, we used to get faxes, and
Yes.
the layouts were drawn on a massive board which used to be set in the office, and we've come from that to CAD and all these
Yeah,
amazing softwares. You know where I'm going with it. And the
absolutely.
response, normally you would get a
Oh,
fax for a survey or a site visit. Now you get a text message. Could you be there like now? So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
changed quite a lot. So like you have seen so many cycles in the industry. What changes have you seen? What trends are you seeing for the future? It's fascinating for me because, my span of the experience, like you have got so much time in the building services. It's just absolutely
Yeah,
fascinating.
maybe too much time. I don't know. Maybe too much. No, and you're quite right that going back even before that, we used to write letters to clients, and they used to get posted, and we used to say, what do you want to do with our metaphoric seventh floor, and we used to write a letter and send them a drawing, and then it would take 2 days to get there, and then they would send us a letter back, and then we'd react to that. Now we're in an instantaneous world now, and that is a change. But I think that the cycles that I see often work around economic cycles. That has a huge influence, and we've always been cognizant as a business of the commercial, the money required to make a building function. So the cycles that I think we often see are one, are economic cycles. Two, they are the real estate cycles that follow those economic cycles. So whether there is money in the economy or whether there's not money in the economy. But the main change I think I've seen is the globalization of our industry. We used to only build chillers and boilers in small factories up in Sheffield,
Mm.
and they would be built by guys in a really, probably really poor environments, and that was what we installed in buildings. And then in the 80s and 90s, suddenly we realized the rest of the world was building chillers and boilers perhaps better than we were. The economics, so we've become a globalized industry now, and we it's not unusual to be importing perhaps 70% of the hardware that we use in a building to build in a building, and import. There's a pump failed. There's a pump failed in one of our buildings that we've noticed that just next week. It has a backup, but we know we need to replace it. We've tried to repair it and we can't. So now we're looking to purchase that pump, and to the client, it's like tomorrow. The best place we can get one is from Italy, and that way that we function and the way that we service the industry has changed so dramatically now, from almost a cottage industry to a global industry. And that's perhaps the major change that I've seen over time. Plus the intensification of building services. It was really quite rudimentary not so very long ago.
I mean,
And
smart cities, right? Sorry, Dave.
oh,
I
yeah,
that's a whole another level that we are contributing towards in
absolutely.
our future. Yeah.
And Saudi Arabia are building literally new cities as we speak. Dubai and the Middle East and the Emirates is building new cities and speak new cities in the Philippines that we can and our experience as a business on a global level, and on our reach to those people, because we have these extra years of experience in the built environment, is assisting in all of those, that combined hive knowledge that we have now. And FHP is fundamental for that, because we've been around for so long. There is an intrinsic knowledge in how these things need to be done. The technology is changing, the scales are bigger, the intensity is bigger, but at the end of the day, it is still the same pipes and wires. Bigger ones, smaller ones, larger ones,
Just
longer ones.
controlled from the apps, though, Dave. So that's the
Yeah,
difference.
yeah. This is absolutely true.
I'm just like sometimes I'm like my phone is actually a remote control. Without planning it, everything comes Wi-Fi enabled, and you have to go on the app and change it, and yeah, it's just
But I think it's important to, and it might be that technology is the winner here, and technology is the thing that will help us to make our industry sustainable. And bearing in mind, we contribute because of our use of property. Perhaps only behind the transport industry are we the most intensive user of property. Process engineering and the likes is, but what we touch in people's everyday life, we can be a tutor in the way that people manage the energy that they use, and we can be a huge part of the education process to make people understand just the impact of what we're providing for them is a cost. And I see perhaps a cycle of going from those intensive, very very modern engineering services. I can see a time when we go back to the more passive engineering principles of 100 years ago, and using natural cooling more, using the natural environment that we have to store heat and to store energy for use at a later time. And I hope that people across the world can reduce our impact on the environment, reduce our impact on the planet. And I hope our engineers can learn over time to make things perhaps simpler. Simpler might mean less intensive. They might mean the less use of energy. Hopefully not to impact on the built environment that we're providing. But my dream is that we as an industry, we become carbon zero. Not only in a carbon zero sense that we're providing an environment to our clients, but just in the way that we function every day. Every day. And that houses become to the point where they don't need a gas supply, where they don't need an electricity supply, that the technology that we can provide to those individual properties or we've all seen the growth of communal properties now. Every railway station in London, every built environment across the world, that the intensity with people living in 10 million person cities, we will need to find a way of providing those services to people such that they can function in a changing temperate climate that is less intrusive to the environment. And I think technology can help us do that. I'm not clever enough to do that, Gary, but I hope we can inspire the next generations of engineers to find those solutions that don't mean burning carbon fuels, that don't mean even needing nuclear power, that they will find a way to provide a way that humans can live in a built environment without impacting on our
self-sustained way, really, isn't it? Which is a bit
has to
more
be
like circular.
and I love the word sustainable, that it is, by the true meaning of the word, that it is non-intrusive on our environment, that it can continue forever and a day. But I just technology can help that process, undoubtedly.
Yeah. It's even when we talk about ESG in the industry, in the real estate
Yeah,
world, in the built environment, I feel like engineering practices, including FHP, we've got so much on the to give, because you touch
yeah,
on the environment side of it. I guess if I have to talk more about ESG, the E is probably the most recognized, the most, plant trees, offset carbon.
yeah.
If I have to, and it's the biggest one as well, the climate action, the Paris agreements and stuff. So it's the S part where people get a bit confused, and it just is like, how do the societal contributions of companies and businesses. And you just put it so beautifully with the engineering consultancies like ourselves at FHP. You touch on the comfort of people living in in communities, in offices, and just bringing that together. Or excuse me, I'll start again.
No,
In
we can be hugely influential in
Yeah,
the
exactly.
world functions. We,
And also even like sourcing it from the right place where people are treated properly, where
yeah,
your condensers and chillers are coming, and it's not, we all know what effect it can have on the people who are working in the manufacturing units if they're not being careful, if the people who are running them are not being aware of those things. So it's like we're touching so many of those things, and just by nature of what we do and how we have to calculate everything and log everything, the governance side of it, like, so if I have to give like an example of businesses who can make so much impact, I would definitely say engineering is up there, isn't it? So
Oh,
you have a
absolutely.
slightly more clarity and access to that information, as it were.
And I want us to be. We talked earlier about how we don't want to see the engineering services that provide us with our built environment. We want the impact to be minimal of what it is that we are providing. We want people to be comfortable, and the population of the world, I'm afraid, is only going to increase. And across the world, we're seeing people's demands for that comfortable environment, who are living in. It's been warm in the UK, as we know, over the last few weeks, but the world is spreading, and we need to make sure that we can provide a comfortable environment for those individuals in Africa and Asia and the more less temperate regions, and the colder regions of this world, where they can function and provide a useful contribution to human society, but without the impacts that, if we're honest with each other, the impact that the Industrial Revolution from the UK and beyond had a detrimental effect on this world. We've built a set of circumstances where it was acceptable just to pump out emissions, just to use energy and waste it, and just to poison our atmosphere. And we can't do that anymore. We know that, but it's down to the engineers, I think, of this generation. I was going to say the next generation, and it's not. It's this generation of engineers who are going to have to make that change.
No pressure.
No, yes, indeed, no pressure.
Watch out, every engineer from today's generation. We have a challenge for you.
We have to start thinking differently, and we have to start thinking in the way that FHP have done over the last 30 years, of reusing, of remodeling, of revisiting the properties that we have and engineering them to be less impactful on the environment than they were previously. And that's a huge challenge. It is a huge challenge, but it's a hugely exciting opportunity for this industry also, that we can have such an influence on the way that the human race functions for the next hundreds and thousands and hopefully millions of years, that we can start that process now. And it's a rethink of the way that we provide those engineering services. And my dream for FHP is that we're at the forefront of that, in the way that we were at the forefront of maintenance management in buildings, in the forefront of the passive designs of the 80s and 90s. I want us to be part of that whole, and be open to the learning exercise that comes with that. It's about being on. We're not telling people what it is that they have to have. We want to listen to what our clients and what people need across this world, and let's develop something and engineer something for them that is fit for purpose, but is non-impactful on our literally, and I could get quite emotional, but our beautiful world. It has to be done in the right way, and it's a huge responsibility that we have as an industry.
Which is, yeah, very beautifully put, Dave. Very beautifully put. Well, just one traditional question, as it were, which I'm following through the podcast, because that kind of sums up my being, the way my brain thinks, and is every time you have an opportunity, there is a risk. And so,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how do you manage the risk in your head, and how do you overcome it and deliver, kind of thing? And there have been times in my life where I would be like, why am I doing this to myself? And I think all of us have that. And then, 10 years down the line, and you're like, oh, I'm so glad I did it. And I'm so glad I stuck through it, because it helped, and it has helped in the journey for the growth, as it were. That's what I truly believe, that when you're uncomfortable, that's where the growth happens.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
in the ordinary day to day where. So, what has been your risk you have taken, and
Okay.
what have you kind of learned from it, which you'd like to share with our listeners?
I I I reflect back on making the fundamental change for me from being an employee within a business and a colleague and a day-to-day function of a business to actually owning a business and having the responsibility of owning that business. And of course, goes with that
And that's just to give the background to the listeners, because you were
thank you.
four business partners, or rather four colleagues, who then bought
Yeah.
the business from the exiting owners.
Yes, indeed.
Is that,
So
yeah.
from my start, it's literally the lowest rank of individual within FHP. I came with my, and I call them absolutely friends and colleagues, to own the business. And not just, Gary, it wasn't just the financial risk that we took at that time. And it wasn't a great time. It was just at the end of one of our any number of recessions that have happened in this economy over the years. But it wasn't just the financial responsibility that took, it was realizing that you had the lives of your colleagues and the lives of your family, your new family, in they became your responsibility. That the people that worked for you and the people that worked for the business and inputted the business every day, you had a responsibility to make sure their wages, where they were relying on me and us to make sure that business functioned well every day, that they were happy within that business, and that it paid their mortgages, and it put their kids through school, and it put food on the table. And that was, I perhaps didn't realize how much of that at the time I was taking on, but it happened very, very quickly. And that risk that you took, but you mentioned the growth that comes from that, Gary. And I've been really fortunate in my working life to experience that transition of, you know, employee to owner, and all the worries and the pressure that go with that. And we're delighted now as a group of these four individuals to hand that legacy on to a new generation of engineers, you being one of those, and new owners of this business, and not without its risk, not without its headaches, not without its pressures, but it's important. And I think one thing that Iola's grasped, and you and James grasped as owners of this business now, is that responsibility to our colleagues, responsibilities to our employees. And that's the one thing that I hope FHP reflects, the honesty and the integrity of its employees and its staff and the colleagues that we have in the business. And if FHP is known for anything, I want it to continue to be known for that honesty and integrity that the friends that I've known in this business, and the friends that I have, and the people I've worked with for the last 30 odd years have shown. And I hopefully that will always be there. It will be part of FHP's DNA. We're a family. We produce and we work, but at the end of the day, it's about existing as a group of people comfortably with ourselves every day.
Well, that is so nicely put, and as it were, it was the metaphorical baton being passed, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's
That was a meeting of minds, wasn't it? That's a meeting
yes.
of minds, and a meeting of ethos, and a meeting of the way that I think I expect and you expect people to be treated with respect and with honesty. And that I hope is something that stays with FHP, under new guidance of yourself and James for the next 30 years.
Long may it continue, hey? Godspeed. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining us today. It was absolute pleasure to, spend time with you, share the platform with you, and share the stories which I listen to, and I have the great pleasure, or rather, I'm very grateful to have you at the end of the phone call sometimes to just bounce ideas and dip into the the huge experience pool you have got alongside Graham as well. And so it's, I'm just grateful to have that as a part of the team and as a family. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thanks, Gary.